The last thing I ever saw was a sunrise. I didn't know it'd be the last, not until everything after it vanished. But sometimes, when you lose everything you thought made you human, you find the one thing that actually does. They say your life flashes before your eyes before you die. But what they don't tell you is, it also flashes right before it disappears forever. For me, it was a sunrise over Lake Michigan, just a sliver of orange slicing through charcoal clouds. I'd pulled an all-nighter designing mock-ups for a restaurant client who still hadn't paid me. My laptop had just crashed, again. I took my coffee outside, barefoot on the porch, and there it was. That sky. Like a painting half-smeared by a drunk god. Then darkness. It didn't fall like a curtain. It crept, subtle, like fog slipping through the cracks. I blinked, rubbed my eyes. Thought maybe I was overtired. By noon, the sun was gone. By nightfall, everything was. Retina detachment. Both eyes. Unlucky, they said. A rare simultaneous occurrence. Like I'd won the world's worst lottery. I was 29. My name's Ethan. Or at least, it was. Because whoever I was before I went blind died with that sunrise. What came after was a different man. Broken, angry, quiet. For the first 6 months, I didn't leave my apartment. What was the point? Every sound was a threat. Every voice felt like pity dressed in politeness. I learned how many steps it took to get from my bed to the bathroom, how to measure pasta by touch, how to tell time by the temperature of the room. But I didn't learn how to be okay. That wasn't in the manual. Then came Nora. She was a volunteer through some outreach program for newly vision-impaired adults, which sounded like a polite way to say people who can't see and might break things. She was tall, spoke with her hands even when I couldn't see them, and had a voice that made you feel like the world wasn't such a sharp place. She didn't coddle. Want to sit here and rot? She said one morning, fine. But don't pretend you're doing something noble. You're not brave. You're hiding. I threw the radio across the room. She laughed. Good, she said. Anger means you're still in there. A week later, she brought me a laptop. Modified, voice-controlled, screen reader, all that. I told her I didn't need charity. She told me it wasn't charity, it was a tool. The difference, she said, was what I built with it. And that was the first time I thought about building anything again. See, before the blindness, I was a freelance UX/UI designer. Decent one, too. But always scraping, always begging for invoices to be paid. I thought I loved the hustle. Turns out, I loved the illusion of control. Now I had nothing but time and a quiet rage. So I started small. Just voice notes to myself. Ideas. Rants. Then I started designing again. Rough sketches in audio form. Layout flows I narrated like podcasts to no one. I describe how a user should feel, what friction points mattered, why most accessibility tools felt like an afterthought. Then I got mad again. Because everything, every app, every site, every single piece of digital real estate treated blind users like inconveniences. Like ghosts. And somewhere in that anger, a question sparked. What if we build a system designed for us, not around us? Not some clunky add-on. Not a screen reader slapped over cluttered nonsense. But a full UX environment for the blind, by the blind. Where gestures mattered more than colors, where soundscapes replaced animations, where data was felt, not seen. And for the first time since I'd gone blind, I didn't feel useless. I felt dangerous. The first real version of the platform lived entirely in my head. I called it OWL because owls see in the dark, because I missed metaphors, and because it sounded like something that could fly even when grounded. OWL wasn't just a piece of software. It was a concept. A full-access digital operating layer for the visually impaired. Haptic feedback. Natural language nav layered auditory depth cues. I knew how it should feel. What I didn't know was how to build it. That's where Nate came in. Nate was one of those guys who lived on energy drinks and slept under server racks. I'd hired him once, back in my sighted days, to build out a backend for a food delivery app that imploded 3 weeks after launch. He never got paid, but we kept in touch, mostly memes and rants. I called him. No preamble. I've got something, I said. What? A grudge? No. A blueprint. For something real. For us. A long pause. Then, us. People who don't get to use the internet unless it's with a stick and a prayer. I expected skepticism. Instead, Nate said, I'm listening. He came over that night with a Linux laptop duct taped at the hinge and a bag of takeout that smelled like regret. I laid out the concept, crude and unpolished, but fire-hot in my chest. Accessibility isn't a feature, I said. It's a design principle. A human right. I want to build the first OS layer where vision isn't a default. He leaned back, chewed a dumpling. You're talking about an interface paradigm shift. No GUI. Just spatial audio, pattern mapping, predictive cue logic. You're talking about replacing sight. Exactly. He whistled low. That's either insane or brilliant. Both, I said. Probably. So we started building. Not in a fancy co-working loft, not with seed money or advisors or equity. Just me and Nate, in my apartment, with code, coffee, and my voice describing wireframes like I was narrating a dream I couldn't see. We built in fragments. Tested with real users, some blind since birth, some like me, newly fallen into the dark. Al began to take shape. Menus that responded to breath and tone, information parsed like Braille but spoken with sonic nuance. Instead of navigating through a screen, you moved within a space of sound and vibration. And something amazing happened. People stopped asking how we'd make money. They started asking how they could help. First, it was Maribel, a transcriber from New Mexico who offered to test Al's voice parsing in 3 dialects. Then Kareem, a blind coder from Toronto, who rewrote Nate's haptic engine from scratch and doubled our performance overnight. Then came the noise. Someone leaked a demo clip online. Just a 3-minute audio walkthrough of the dashboard, an immersive, layered audio interface that felt like a cathedral in your ear. It went viral. Suddenly, journalists were calling. Accessibility forums exploded. We got labeled the blind man's Tesla, which I hated, but I understood. People want heroes. They want arcs. And apparently, I was becoming one. But not everyone was thrilled. A man named Richard Halperin called me one afternoon. Mr. Cole, he said, I'm with SoftGrid Ventures. We represent several major stakeholders in current assistive tech markets. We'd like to talk about a partnership. I knew that tone. Money wrapped in threats. We're not looking to sell, I said. He laughed. Everything sells eventually, especially revolutions. I hung up, but the message was clear. We weren't invisible anymore. That night, someone tried to breach our servers. Twice. The second time, they almost succeeded. Nate stayed up for 40 hours patching holes and cursing at firewalls like they'd insulted his mother. When he finally crashed on the couch, I sat there in the dark, listening to Al's boot chime repeat in a loop. Just a soft tone, 3 notes, simple, rising. But to me, it sounded like defiance, like something impossible breaking through. We weren't building software anymore. We were building a movement. We didn't have an office. We had a borrowed basement. Kareem flew in from Toronto 2 weeks after the leak. Showed up with a guide cane, noise-canceling headphones, and a backpack full of tech like he was assembling a rocket in customs. First thing he said when I met him, "Your apartment smells like takeout and failure." I love it. He stayed. We made room. The team became 5. Me, Nate, Kareem, Maribel, remotely, and a quiet genius named Dee, who built the auditory mesh grid that made Al feel like space, not software. She never showed her face. We called her the Ghost. All we knew was that she was ex-military, worked in DARPA interface systems, and left because her conscience made more noise than her paycheck. We didn't ask questions. We didn't need to. Al was now alive. It could parse emotion in your voice, guide you with subtle spatial pings like sonar in your skull. It let a user feel data like texture in the air. People who hadn't been able to navigate an app on their own in years were now building playlists, posting articles, editing documents. One tester wrote, "This isn't an interface. It's a revolution of dignity." And yet, no investors. None we could trust. The moment we pitched Al, the room changed. Suddenly, it was all about licensing partnerships and streamlining for enterprise applications. Code 4, let us box it, sell it, dilute it. I wanted none of that. We were self-funded through donations, consulting work, and, ironically, a GoFundMe titled Blind but Building. It bought us time, not safety. I was sleeping 3 hours a night. My body forgot what normal felt like. But my mind was on fire. Then came the TEDx invite. Someone forwarded it to us. "Saw your demo. We need you on stage." I almost deleted the email. The thought of standing in front of a crowd, in the dark, on display like an inspirational trophy, it turned my stomach. But Kareem put a hand on my shoulder and said, "Visibility isn't vanity. It's strategy." So I said yes. In the week before the talk, everything fell apart. We got hacked. Not some amateur phishing attempt. A full, calculated breach. Nate spotted it when one of our redundant test logs started showing feedback loops that didn't exist. Dee backtraced the spike to a node cluster in Zurich. They weren't just trying to crash it, she said. They were mapping it, copying. We shut down access, locked everything. Then the email started. Anonymous, untraceable, all with the same message. Owl is too powerful to stay in your hands. Then, step aside or be erased. D went dark. Maribel stopped replying. We held an emergency meeting in my apartment. No power, just candles and paranoia. I sat cross-legged on the floor, palms sweating against the keys of my laptop. What do we do? I asked. Silence. Then Kareem said something I'll never forget. Let them try. We're not building for their world. We're building for the ones they never see coming. And right there, in the half-lit room full of exhausted rebels and caffeine ghosts, we decided. No compromise. We released the beta. Public. Free. Fully open source. OWL 1.0 launched at 3:17 a.m. on a Thursday morning. By noon, our site crashed from traffic. Thousands of users downloaded it. Thousands more mirrored it. OWL spread faster than we could track. And with it came the stories. A blind girl in New Delhi used OWL to submit her first college application without assistance. A Vietnam vet in Michigan used it to navigate his smart home for the first time without calling his daughter. A 12-year-old in Brazil emailed us. I didn't know the internet could sound like this. I thought I was broken. I'm not. Thank you. I read that one 3 times. Memorized it. Whispered it out loud like prayer or armor. Because I knew what was coming next. Not applause, but war. 2 days after we launched OWL, someone parked a black sedan across the street from my building. Didn't move for 6 hours. No plates. Tinted windows. Engine off. Just watching. I'd have dismissed it, chalked it up to paranoia, but then it showed up again the next day. Same car, same spot, different driver. I heard the crunch of boots on gravel when I stepped outside to get fresh air. Whoever they were, they didn't flinch. Nate called it surveillance theater. Meant to spook us. It worked. We switched up routines. Changed IPs. Moved most of our DevOps into a secure shell D build off-grid. The old basement setup was dismantled in one night, monitors, cables, every server part packed and ghosted. Kareem took off to stay with his cousin in Cleveland. Maribel went completely silent. Not ghosted, just scared. I didn't blame her. 2 days later, an OWL beta tester in DC posted on a private forum that her device had stopped responding. The next morning, her house burned down. Accidental electrical fire, said the reports. But she'd written something just hours before in our community Discord. Feels like someone's trying to jam OWL. Getting weird static when I use the menu pings. Never happened before. We archived it. Took screenshots. But what do you do with suspicion when no one wants to hear it? You build louder. That TEDx talk? I almost pulled out. I didn't. I put on a suit that didn't quite fit and let Kareem wire an IFB into my ear so he could guide me through the stage. When the spotlight hit, I felt naked. Exposed. And then I remembered something Nora once said. When you lose your sight, you learn the weight of silence. So fill it. Loudly. So I did. I told them how blindness isn't just physical, it's systemic. How every design choice that centers sight assumes the rest of us are collateral. I told them OWL wasn't a gift, it was a correction. A reckoning. And I ended with this. You don't need to see the world to shape it. You only need to refuse to be erased from it. People stood. Clapped. Some cried. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt seen. The wrong kind of seen. By morning, our donation link was frozen. Stripe said fraud detection. We knew better. Then Kareem's identity got flagged as potentially suspicious by Canadian financial services. His bank account? Locked. Someone was turning screws. Then I got the call. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. You're making a lot of noise, the voice said. Male. Unaccented. Unhurried. You the one in the sedan? I asked. The voice chuckled. That's not important. What's important is understanding the limits of your freedom. I said nothing. Keep OWL as a toy, he continued. Let the blind have their amusement. But don't weaponize it. Don't organize. Don't mobilize. And if I do? There was a long pause. Then we introduced consequences. The line went dead. I sat there, phone still warm, as if it had burned part of my ear. Nate was the one who broke the silence later. He leaned against my kitchen counter, sipping expired orange juice straight from the carton like nothing mattered anymore. They're scared, he said. Of what? We're barely standing. He shrugged. Exactly. If 5 half-broke nerds in a basement can build something this disruptive, imagine what happens when 1,000 do. And I saw it. Not just Owl, but what Owl meant. It wasn't just about accessibility. It was about access. Period. About rewriting the rules of who gets to participate in the digital world, in decisions, in data. And the ones who'd built empires assuming our silence? They were listening now. And they didn't like what they heard. I used to think revolution was loud. Protests, bullhorns, street chants echoing off marble steps. But what I learned, the real fights, the ones that change systems, they happen in silence. In lawsuits. In broken code. In whispered threats and broken funding. The week after my TEDx talk, 3 of our largest mirrors for OWL 1.0 went offline. Not down, deleted. Gone. Entire forums scrubbed. YouTube reviews flagged as harmful misinformation. One by one, the ladders we'd used to scale the wall got yanked out from under us. Then Kareem called from Cleveland. Don't go outside tonight. What? I got tipped. Someone's moving on you. I don't know who. But they know your building, your floor, the fire escape. How do you know? I don't. But the source is not the kind that jokes. So I packed a bag. I left the apartment I hadn't seen in a year and vanished into the city that never bothered to ask why I couldn't look it in the eye anymore. I went to Nora. She hadn't heard from me in months. She opened her door at 3 a.m. in slippers and sleep and didn't ask a single question. Just made me sit, drink something warm, and breathe. I told her everything. About Al. About the threats. About how far we'd come and how close we were to losing it all. You always wanted to matter, she said. Well, now you do. I laughed, but it cracked halfway out. Do you regret it? She asked. No, I said. But I'm tired of building while being hunted. She didn't speak for a while. Then, quietly, then stop building. Start scaling. And just like that, I knew what we had to do. We had to go global. The only way to protect OWL was to spread it faster than it could be buried. I reconnected with Kareem and Nate. We reached out to every blind dev network, every underground accessibility collective, every speech therapist who moonlit as a coder. We called it the Echo Protocol. OWL would no longer be a product. It would be an ecosystem, a toolkit, a digital insurgency. We released the full development stack, tutorials, APIs, devlogs, localization packages. We seeded it across every forum, cloud, and decentralized storage net we could find. Deghosted back into encrypt the core kernel and wrap it in a worm script that regenerated every time someone tried to delete it. We turned OWL into a virus, but the kind that healed. And it worked. In less than 3 weeks, we saw OWL clones sprouting in 22 countries. An engineer in Ghana adapted it for tactile wristbands. A teacher in Mongolia rewrote the interface in native Mongolian phonemes and integrated it with low-cost school tablets. A former street artist in Berlin developed an add-on that interpreted ambient noise and translated it into vibration patterns for deaf-blind users. OWL stopped being ours. It became theirs. And for the first time, I let go. But power doesn't like being shared. The counterattacks got worse. Nate's home server was raided. A team in tactical gear, unmarked IDs, anonymous tip. He escaped through a back window and went dark. Kareem's cousin was arrested on a bogus fraud charge. Held for 48 hours, no lawyer. Then they came for me. Not with guns, but with shame. A major tech outlet published a leak, emails they claimed showed I'd staged OWL's accessibility claims to generate sympathy and donations. Fake. Easily disprovable. But viral. Suddenly, I wasn't a visionary. I was a fraud. A grifter. A blind man manipulating the world with his disability sob story. I got hate mail. Death threats. Even a blindfold in the mail, smeared with red paint, and a note that read, "Keep pretending. Eventually, we'll make it permanent." I sat on Nora's floor that night, shaking so hard I dropped my tea. She cleaned it without a word, then said, "You can stop now." I can't. Then fight back. With what? She grabbed my hand. With everything you've got left. I gave my last interview from the backroom of a bookstore in Queens. No lighting rig, no suit, no scripted talking points. Just a voice recorder and a journalist named Lila Tran, who said she'd flown from Seattle just to hear my side. "I'm not here to rehabilitate you," she said. "Just to document the fall, if that's where this is going." I told her everything. From the porch sunrise that ended my vision, to the first ping of OWL's sound interface. I talked until my throat ached and my coffee went cold. When I finished, she sat for a full minute without speaking. Finally, "Do you ever wish you hadn't started it?" I didn't answer right away. Then, only when I remember what peace used to feel like. Was it worth it? Ask the people using it, I said. Ask the ones who stopped feeling invisible. She left the next morning. Her article went live 4 days later. It didn't trend. It detonated. The Blind Visionary. How Ethan Cole saw a world no one else would build. It wasn't sanitized. It wasn't a puff piece. It was raw. Quotes from our users, from former devs, even from one of the whistleblowers who admitted they'd been paid to leak false documents to smear me. Turns out Halperin, the investor who'd called me early on, had quietly filed patents on a nearly identical system 2 weeks after Al's launch. He wanted the space cleared. Burned. But Al wouldn't burn. Lila's article became fuel. Not for sympathy. For rage. For unity. Accessibility advocates rallied. Tech ethicists published op-eds. One senator gave a floor speech quoting our source code's mission statement verbatim. They tried to bury us. Instead, they made us bulletproof. That's when I met her. Amara. She was 22. Born blind. Studied computational linguistics at Stanford. Her thesis? She built an OWL add-on that allowed real-time translation of tonal languages through vibration alone. She called it resonance. When she emailed me, it was just 3 lines. I don't want to work for you. I want to build with you. When do we start? We started that night. Within weeks, she had an entire team of vision-impaired engineers working on OWL forks. New branches, new languages, new frontiers. What we began in a basement became a global effort with no center, no brand, no CEO. I was obsolete. And that, finally, meant I'd done it right. I stepped back. I let Amara take the lead on resonance. Nate, once recovered, built a nonprofit infrastructure to keep the code open and legally unassailable. Kareem launched a boot camp for blind coders. Maribel resurfaced to run training programs across Latin America. Al became more than code. It became curriculum, culture, community. Me? I found a place by the water. Not Lake Michigan, somewhere smaller. A quiet town with slow buses and loud birds. I didn't need noise anymore. I'd built something louder than I could ever speak. One morning, a package arrived. No label, just a device. It looked like a cross between a smartwatch and a tuning fork. Lightweight, elegant, familiar. Inside was a note. This is what you started. We just finished it. Wear it. Walk. Listen. Amara. I strapped it on. Activated it. The world shifted. Suddenly I could feel sound, not just hear it. I could sense people as pulses, sense space like pressure, read the shape of a room like braille on my skin. It wasn't sight. It was something better. It was awareness, presence, peace. I walked outside, down the street, past the bakery, across the park, and for the first time since I lost my sight, I didn't hesitate. I didn't flinch. I didn't need to be led. I just moved. Free. I don't go on stages anymore. No more keynotes. No more spotlights. No more microphones trying to trap my voice in amber. These days, I teach. Quietly. Online. Sometimes in person, when the group's small and the stakes aren't built on applause. They always ask me the same question, eventually. Why'd you do it? And I tell them the truth. Because I was angry. I was angry that a world could move so fast without ever once slowing down for the people who walk it differently. I was angry at the tech bros who made billions off convenience, but never once thought about clarity. I was angry at myself for almost letting the darkness win. But I didn't build OWL out of bitterness. I built it out of defiance. And when people saw that, when they felt it, they carried it, expanded it, gave it bones and breath and names I'll never know. I met a boy in New Zealand last fall, 12, born blind. He spoke 5 languages, taught himself to code in 3 of them. He used an OWL fork called Koru, optimized for Maori rhythm patterns. His mom said he never once said the word disability, said he called it my kind of normal. I met a woman in Cairo who used OWL to run an entire e-commerce business from her rooftop. She'd been told for years she couldn't compete. Now she outsold most of the district. I met a retired jazz musician in Atlanta who used our soundscapes to compose again. He said OWL tuned the world back to a key I could play in. These aren't success stories. They're survival stories. They're proof that you don't need vision to see your place in the world. You just need a doorway and someone to build it. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd never gone blind. If that sunrise had just been another Tuesday and not the last light I'd ever know. Would I have coasted through life? Built pretty interfaces for ugly companies? Laughed at memes and billed for mediocrity? Maybe, but maybe not. Maybe something inside me was already breaking. Maybe it took blindness to crack it open and let something truer spill out. I don't romanticize it. I'm not glad I lost my sight. But I'm not mourning it anymore, either. Because the man who lost everything that morning, the one who stumbled barefoot onto a porch and watched the sky disappear, he's gone. But what came after? That man's still building, still listening, still here. A name worth knowing. Not because of what I saw, but because of what I helped others see. And that echo? It doesn't fade. It stays.